Good evening. I just feel like it's really important that I introduce myself to you all again. My name is Brian, but you can call me Chris if you like. No, it's great fun. I adore the governor. He's an incredibly dedicated man, and it's probably hard to remember 750,000 names of every Alaskan. So as part of the Innovation Summit, driving innovation, there are hard skills we've talked about that are important in pursuit of innovation, science, technology, engineering, math, but there's also a creative side that's really critical. And so we're really excited that as one of the components of the Innovation Summit each year is to incorporate art for you. So we're bringing to you, again, very pleased to bring to you just some real outstanding world-class artistic opportunity. So I'd like to invite from the Orpheus Project, Katie Giorgio and Todd Hutt to introduce their work.
Good evening. My name's Katie Giorgio. I'm one of the directors of Orpheus Project, a performing arts organization based here in Juneau. I'm joined by Todd Hunt. He's our artistic director, and we're here to share a little bit about a project we've been working on. Thank you, Brian and Dana from the Juneau Economic Development Council for having us tonight. Orpheus Project has been providing meaningful musical experiences to Alaskan audiences since 1996. You might recognize us by our former name, which was Opera to Go, but about 3 years ago, we changed our name. Orpheus Project draws primarily on artists within the Juneau and greater Alaskan community, allowing them a scope for their talents and opportunities to further artistic growth. Some of our recent large productions have included Bernstein's West Side Story, Monteverdi's Orfeo, and Janacek's Cunning Little Vixen. We are also the umbrella organization for the Amalga Chamber Orchestra and the Taku Winds Wind Ensemble, among other small ensembles. So now about our current project. On October 23rd, 1918, the SS Princess Sophia, a Canadian Pacific Railway steamship, departed Skagway fully loaded with 350 passengers, most of whom were traveling south for the winter from the Alaskan and Canadian gold mining communities along the Yukon River. This was Sophia's last scheduled trip for the season. She was headed to Juneau and eventually to Vancouver and Victoria, British Columbia. The passengers were mostly community leaders and business owners and their families from the Yukon who had traveled by riverboat to Whitehorse and then to Skagway on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad. Notable passengers included Walter and Frances Harper. Walter Harper was in the first successful expedition to Summit Denali in 1913, and Lulu Mae Eads, who you will meet in a few minutes. She was an infamous dance hall owner in Dawson. As well as John Pugh, who was a customs officer from Juneau, but I promise there's actually no relation to the former Chancellor of UAS, John Pugh. They were met with a blinding snowstorm in Lynn Canal north of Juneau, and due to a navigational error and bad weather, they struck Vanderbilt Reef at full speed at approximately 2 a.m. on October 24th. They were able to send wireless distress signals to Haines and Juneau, and a flotilla of rescue ships, which was mostly made of fishing vessels, arrived later in the day. But due to high winds and surf, and also due to the fact that the Sophia was almost completely out of the water on the reef and seemed relatively secure, Captain Locke of the Sophia decided to wait for the storm to die down before trying to mount any serious rescue effort. The storm continued much longer than they had anticipated, and on the morning of October 26th, the rescue ships returned to the reef to discover that the Sophia had sunk during the night. Only the forward mast of the Sophia was visible out of the water. None of the 350 passengers survived. Watches and clocks that were recovered had stopped at roughly 5:50 p.m. the night before. The Sophia tragedy represents the single deadliest maritime disaster on the Pacific coast of North America. Despite that fact, her story is relatively unknown. It was, of course, overshadowed by previous disasters of the Titanic and Lusitania, but the Sophia sank just as World War I was ending. In fact, the vessel carrying the bodies of the victims arrived in Victoria, British Columbia on November 11, 1918, which is Armistice Day. The world was simply tired about hearing about death and sadness. So, a few years back, Todd realized the 100th anniversary was approaching and decided this was the perfect opportunity for a brand new opera to be written based on her story. Todd, would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you listen to that story, and when I realized that the 100th anniversary was coming up, I was like, wow, it's just operatic. These people were stuck on a boat on a rock in the middle of Lynn Canal for like 40 hours before the ship finally sank, and as horrible as that is, it does sound like it would make a great opera. So that's sort of where the impetus came from. And then, you spend a lot of time as somebody thinking about an opera commission, like how do you approach this and not make it, like Titanic, the movie? Because that's actually one thing that our team decided we did not want to do from the very beginning. I was thinking, I need a really good librettist. A librettist is a person who writes the words for an opera that are sung and basically comes up with the story as well as the dramatic flow of how things go. So I'm racking my brain and finally thought, Dave Hunsaker, who lives, up north end of Juneau. He's a playwright. He's a screenwriter. Yeah, maybe he's interested, and if not, maybe he can point me in the right direction. Well, I just sent him a real quick note and said, "Hey, I have this idea. What do you think? Let's talk about it." And he wrote back within like a couple of hours, I think, and it's like, I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it. He'd never written an opera libretto before, but was super excited about it, knew way more than I had at that point about the disaster, so he was actually the perfect person. And after we'd sort of talked about how the story would go, it was my next job to come up with who's going to write the music. I had thought, well, maybe I should write the music, but I ditched that right away, seeing the seriousness and complexity of the piece, and I wanted somebody with a little bit more experience. So there's a Fairbanks composer named Emerson Eads, who I know from some of my trips up to Fairbanks, and the season before had just premiered an opera based, it's called The Color of Gold, and it's based on the gold rush to Fairbanks. I was like, oh, this guy has sort of the right idea musically as well as from a background of historical opera. So that's the dream team came together pretty quickly, and although that was like 3 some years ago. So this has been a long process, and we're in the final stretch now. We're 8 months away from the premiere, something like that. It's in October, and we're very excited about getting this, getting this piece out to everybody. So, and you want to have a little bit more from Katie here, and then we'll introduce our singers.
Yeah, so like Todd said, we're really excited that we're actually going to premiere the opera on the 100th anniversary itself, which is October 25th, 2018. It will be at Juneau Douglas High School Auditorium. And a couple special highlights about our production as well. We will be incorporating 3D projection, which, as far as I know, has never been done in Juneau before. You have to rent these big refrigerator-sized projectors and bring them up from Point South. And also Dan Fruits, who's a local Juneau resident artist, he's painting about 20 brand new original paintings that will be integrated into this 3D projection, which will be mapped onto stage pieces and the singers. There are also, that weekend in October, there's other events going on. I've been serving on, we don't have an official name, but it's the Princess Sophia Commemoration Committee, and it's representatives from the state and city museums, Pioneers of Alaska, the Yacht Club, the United States Coast Guard, because we're all trying to kind of come up with a program of events beyond the opera that will happen that weekend. We actually have a website going just for all the local Juneau groups. It's rememberthesophia.org. If you want it, you can Google that. Also, our future plans include taking the opera to Whitehorse and Vancouver, since even though the accident happened here in Juneau, it's largely considered a Canadian tragedy. The vast majority of the passengers were Canadian. So if you're interested in learning more about our project, there are pamphlets on your tables. So please take one with you. Our website and email address is listed on the back. And if you have a chance to join us in a few weeks on March 17th, we're actually giving a free performance, some highlights from the opera at the ABK Library just across the street. That's at 2 p.m. on March 17th. We're going to have the full cast and creative team here that week workshopping the opera, working out kinks and fine-tuning it. And we're also excited that week that we're partnering with Juneau Lyric Opera, and they're going to be doing a lot of educational outreach. So they're going to be going to the schools, targeting 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to tell them about what goes into creating an opera, and we really, really value educating the children about our project as well. And of course, we hope to see you at a premiere in October. And with that, I'll let Todd introduce our musicians.
Hey, so because of the flu going around, we only have one aria, but I think you're going to really like it. This is Sarah Radke Brown, and she's going to be singing an aria by of the character Lulu Mae Eads, who, of course, is Lady Lou of the Robert Service fame. And we also have John Hayes on piano. So this is a kind of a fun departure from what a lot of the stories, of course, very sad and heavy, but she's not, as you will see. So this is Sarah Radke Brown with John Hayes.
And the hobby for too long. There is sun in the south, and I want some. So I said to my beauties, lay off of your duties. I'm sick of this Jack London drama. We'll still cover our asses, but to mind her classes. It's gentlemen down there in Bama.
Thank you.
What a delight that was. Thank you very much, Orpheus Project. Thank you. Okay, the evening just gets better. We've got some great information that we want to share with you this evening, and then we head into our pitch contest, which is a lot of fun. You can, in the back of the room, buy drinks if you'd like, but more important, you can buy tickets and votes, because we're going to vote with our dollars. This is capitalism, right? So we're going to vote with our dollars. We want you to buy those tickets and vote for whoever you think is the most deserving. We'll talk about the prizes later. But now we have an opportunity to hear from a special guest, Lieutenant Governor Byron Mallott. Let me introduce him. An Alaska Native and clan leader of the Tlingit, Raven, Quash, Kee-Kwa'an clan, Byron Mallott serves as Lieutenant Governor of the state of Alaska since 2014. He entered public life as mayor of Yakutat at age 22, and since then his years of service in state include past president of the Alaska Federation of Natives, founding president of the First Alaskans Institute, trustee, chair, and executive director of the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation, and chair, president, and CEO of Sealaska Corporation. So please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Byron Mallott.
Good evening, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a bit hoarse, still getting over the flu. I paused on the way up here to look at the dinner I'm not going to eat, and it looks very delightful, so I want all of you to enjoy it. And Chris, thank you for that introduction. As I thought about this talk, and it's being of Alaskans and in Alaska, but it also reaches out to bring in those from other places who can individually in their businesses, in their work, in their leadership, in their intellectual capacity, help us achieve what we are capable of achieving. I thought about our current circumstance, the fact that Alaska is probably right now at a watershed moment in our future as a state and as a society. And some of you may have heard this before, and I'm going to speak of it again. During the past 3 years, going on 4, when oil plummeted to $26 a barrel from 18 months earlier or thereabouts, $140 a barrel, when some 80% of Alaska's governmental revenues come from that source. We faced a $4 billion plus budget deficit. Today, we still have a significant deficit, but during these 3 years, we've reduced the cost of government. I saw a statistic just very recently that on a per capita basis, Alaska's spending today on government is at 1975 levels. Our core budget is at 2002 levels. Yet we still have those who say, reduce government further before you dig into my pocket and ask for me to contribute to our collective future. We have spent down over $14 billion of reserves that were first established to allow us, when revenues were very high, to use for emergencies like catastrophic events, which Alaska is known for, earthquakes, tsunamis, other events, and were meant to be replenished. We do not now have the resources, the reserves, to replenish any of that. They become one-time reserves. We have seen the funding for our university decline by, I'd say in 4 years, roughly $1 billion. We've worked hard to keep our education funding flat without forcing actual reductions, but flat means that you're not growing and that you're going backwards, doesn't it? Just looking at the rate of inflation. We've taken advantage of leadership at the federal level to create a broader-based system of health care in our state, but still overall our health and social services funding is decreasing. The legislature decreased public safety spending to a level that last year required the governor to ask for more money to meet current needs at a time when crimes of violence were increasing and still are. We have a rural public safety system that is in crisis, where the ability of either local or state public safety officials to respond to emergencies is a matter of days sometimes, as opposed to the hours we who live in 9/11 range or 911 range would expect. I mention these things because it's Alaska's reality right now. Many of you, most of you in this hall, I assume, are Alaskans, and you care about our future as a state. You care about the future of your communities. You care about the future of your families and your children. And I suspect in a significant way for many of you, that is why you innovate. You innovate for many reasons, but I can't help but believe that at our core as Alaskans, we innovate to make our state better. We innovate to make certainly economic opportunity available to ourselves and the enterprises that we might create. But fundamentally, we innovate, and government supports and research and scientific institutions and financial institutions and NGOs support innovation at the levels that they do, because they know that ultimately what we do is create a better society as a consequence. And if your government is failing you, and not investing in our own capacity to grow, to strengthen education, to have public safety at a level where all Alaskans feel safe, to be able to provide health care to all who require it, particularly those who need it most. When we have a public safety system that is not responsive to the needs of all Alaskans. When we have a view of Alaska's future where some leaders can say this: we need to continue to cut services. Government is not important. They even say that a government employee has no value, that what has value is a private sector employee, and what makes most sense in our society is allowing business to invest such that we grow together. Business does not do that. I served 33 years as a director of a major corporation serving Alaska Airlines. I've been a board member of the Federal Reserve Board of San Francisco. I've been on bank boards. I've been the CEO of corporations. I've been the CEO of the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation. Business will not invest in a place that is not competitive. And if we do not have good public safety, if we do not have good education, if we do not have health services, if we do not have infrastructure, if we do not have a society that supports what can make us better as communities, as a state, if we do not invest in ourselves, business will not come. I'd never run for statewide public office before. I had the wonderful opportunity to be mayor of my small hometown at Tlingit Village, which my full-blooded Tlingit mother lived. I've had the honor of being mayor of Juneau for a relatively short period of time, at a time when we needed to fight to keep the capital in Juneau. But that was public service. Neither had Governor Walker run for statewide office before, except in a primary in 2010. Had never served in what is called our larger political offices. And so I'm seeing Alaska from a different, and this is from someone who's grown up, spent his entire life here, tried in my way to make Alaska a better place for my children, for my grandchildren, which my wife Tony, who is joining me this evening, 5 children, 10 grandchildren now, if I'm counting correctly, and 2 great-grandchildren, 1 just newborn. We've stood up a climate change initiative, trying to be responsive in a space in which our federal government is withdrawing and in which the rest of the world needs what Alaska has to offer. And right now, we don't offer very much. I'm sorry to say that. We have a decent university that is working as hard as it can. It has a good and decent reputation in research and in a number of scientific spaces, but it is now going backwards. Our education system is not growing and is not capable of creating in our children collectively across the state on an equal an equitable basis, educational opportunity for every single one of our children. Where are our innovators going to come from? We have to be a healthy society. We have to be a safe society. We have to care collectively about our future in order to have the space, the ability, the comfort, the sense of purpose and shared vision for a future. Ultimately, in order to create an innovative significance to our society. We aren't doing that in Alaska. That's kind of a downer, isn't it? Some of you may believe it, some of you may not. But I've been around a long time, and I believe it fervently, that until and unless Alaskans choose to invest in themselves and in their own future and come together collectively, even innovation in Alaska will begin to wither. We can't have that. We cannot have that. And you in this room can be a voice individually and collectively to help make Alaska the place that it once had an aspiration to be, had a powerful impulse to invest in itself and invest in our children. A young state still, hardly just a bit over a half century old. I remember going to work for Alaska's first governor, first statehood governor. And I remember the sense of passion, the sense of leaning into a future that was so palpable to all of us. We need to recreate that. We need, as Alaskans, everywhere that we live and work, to say, we're going to grow this state. It's unique, it's incredible, it's another country. It has resources a few places in the world have, with the accessibility that we have. We're America's Arctic. We are ground zero in climate change. We have people who want to grow Alaska, people who want to expand our economy, people who want to build the best kind of society for our future. We can do it. Alaska is really another country in terms of its size and its stretch and its richness and its vastness and its beauty and its fragility. And we have a very small population, the population of a small city anywhere else in our country. We can do it if we come together, not in a kumbaya fashion all across the state holding hands. That will never happen. But in our own psyches and our own beliefs and our own values, and what we do as families, what we do as communities, what we do as institutions. I know it's in this room. I know it's across Alaska. It's what keeps me going. With our family, we think every day, my wife and I, what kind of Alaska will they inherit from us? Will it be one in which they accept responsibility proudly and thank us for having done the things that give them the chance to have the opportunity that they deserve? I saw a book and I began to read it. And in it, it was about searching the world for something that doesn't matter. But in it, a female French photojournalist comes to Alaska. She's traveled the world. She writes features and takes photographs for European magazines mostly. And she's seen almost all of our world, almost all of our planet. And after several days in Alaska, granted it's June, and granted the weather's beautiful, and granted there is beauty in everything that we see or cherish or care about. But this lady, in a thoughtful moment, said, you know, God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And on the seventh day, he rested. And I just have to believe that on that seventh day, he contemplated what he had done. And he thought about how he might have done it better. And he thought that there was one more step in the process of creating the most beautiful place that we know of in our collective universes. And he thought long and hard. And that afternoon, he created Alaska for himself. That's the Alaska that I believe we are. The Alaska that I believe we can stand up for. The Alaska I believe we should fight for. I believe it's the Alaska that anyone who lives here for any period of time, whether one who is indigenous and has been here for 10,000 years or one who has arrived, as that French journalist did, and has been here for several days, knows that this place is special. It deserves the best that is special in us. It deserves the kind of attention and nurturing that allows us, yes, to be innovative and to create the sense of wonder, the sense of longing, the sense of accepting and taking all that is beautiful and of wonder in our space and making of it the most that we individually and collectively can for our children's futures. That's Alaska. Thank you so much.
Amen to that. Thank you very much. And you notice, I hope you're enjoying the halibut, right? And I mentioned that because of the halibut hook, right? We just wanted to be consistent with the menu and the recognition. I don't know if we're not having peonies on the table. Sorry, we should have thought that better. Oh, and I want to thank Frenchies for the beautiful. You see my flower here? Yeah. Dana and I both got flowers. We appreciate that support. We have two guests that we'd like to introduce now to jointly make a presentation. So I'll introduce them both. Brittany Sioni and Nolan Colin. Brittany is has been with the state of Alaska since 2012 and serves as the director for the Division of Economic Development. She's been a Juneau resident since 2006, and she was a professor of economics at the University of Alaska Southeast. And Nolan is the executive director of the University of Alaska Center for Economic Development since 2014. He was born and raised in Alaska and has lived in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Kodiak Island. In 2015, he was named to Alaska's Top 40 Under 40. Please welcome Brittany and Nolan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So we do have a PowerPoint, I believe. We'll get that started. So yes, I'm the director for the Division of Economic Development for the state, and it's been a really fun ride. This, one of our major projects that we worked on over the last 2 years is the division has spearheaded the development of the first ever statewide economic development strategy. And so this has been undertaken through mainly the division, but we also, it's a process where you go out and gather community, individual, business, industry feedback. And so that's what we've done. Of these, we now have our phase 1 objectives. These are some of our main goals. Let me get those up there for you. Thanks. So of these, we also have 28 objectives. We've selected 10 as our phase 1 priorities as we move forward in developing these. So it's well known that for an economy to really be healthy, there needs to be competition, there needs to be growth, and there needs to be innovation. And we believe through research that we can look at where we have some opportunities in these areas. So we've worked and partnered with Nolan Clouda's group, Center for Economic Development at the university, to develop a series of reports on emerging sectors. So I'm going to give a preview of the overall series, and then Nolan's going to present some details on our first report that we just released on boat and shipbuilding. So the next one that's going to be coming out is going to be on renewable energy. And we believe that there's a lot of space and opportunity within this sector. So this will be released sometime in April. And Alaska really has been a long leader in this sector and the adoption of the technology, and often out of necessity as we try and replace very high fuel costs. So in this report, we're going to assess the health of what's a fairly young sector, but one that has great international and national demand as it's coming on stronger all of the time. We've found that, just to kind of hint at a few things, that businesses, there's a lot of them, but they're very specialized, as well as some of the needs, which a lot of them are not scalable, and there's definitely need in the financing area. Also out of this is we're really looking to try and take a lot of recommendations, and I think in the boat and shipbuilding, we have a number of really great recommendations for the state to take on, as well as other partners throughout the state. And so as we move forward, we're also looking for different ways to take those ideas and move them into action. And so there's been a number of sprints. There was an ocean technology sprint not that long ago, and now there's a new one coming on for energy, which is Volt 49. So Volt 49 is really going to be for the curious, the creatives, and the problem solvers. The applications, I will let you know, are out now. So if you're interested in participating, or you know someone who is, the applications are due March 1st, so get those in. The sprint will kick off on March 24th and run for 5 weeks and conclude with a cohort presentation. Another one, so we had kind of an initial 2 reports that we started the series with, and now we're moving into another 3. And so we'll introduce these kind of over the next 9 months or so. Another one that we'll be looking at is aviation. Again, it's a very unique sector to our state that we have a lot of activity in. There's really unique materials and unique designs that come out of Alaska for our unique conditions and that are applicable everywhere. So technology development, manufacturing, training are all things that we'll be looking at within this sector. Food production, one of my favorites. So I think we've, particularly in Juneau, have seen this come on greatly in the last few years. I think nationally and everywhere, we're looking for more locally sourced products, artisanal products in our food and beverages. So tentatively, this one will be out in November, probably will be the last one to be released. And then the last one that I want to present is outdoor recreation. Again, another sector that we have a lot of ability, I think, to innovate in. We have the best testing ground for these products. So we see a lot already happening, and we think that there's really room for growth and innovation in this sector as well. So that's an overall kind of view of the reports. I hope you find them interesting. The one that has been released at this point in time is, as I said, the boat and shipbuilding, and I'm going to have Nolan come up and do some presentation on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. So first, a quick story that relates to boats. A first-time crew member on a commercial fishing boat, when he steps on the boat, he nervously asks the skipper, do boats like this sink very often? And the skipper says to him, well, no, usually they just sink once. So when we think about the boat and shipbuilding, the subject of the report that was just released, it's an area in Alaska where we have relatively large market because of our large commercial fisheries. We have a long maritime tradition. We have a strong dependence on marine transportation in general for all aspects of our economy that we don't even always think about. And so it's an area where Alaskans have a concentration of knowledge and skills, and it's a space where we have some type of a comparative advantage in some senses, and the ability to manufacture a product in Alaska is actually kind of a rare thing. Most of the goods that we take for granted are not made here, but we do have this bright boat and shipbuilding sector in the state, and it's something that any amount of demand that can be satisfied by in-state producers is potentially very large. So we have boat builders we have about 30 of them in the state, and the one shipbuilder, of course, in Ketchikan. Even in landlocked Fairbanks, there's a company that produces boats. It's a space where there's a fairly sizable economic impact to it. We think around 700 jobs if you add up the indirect and induced effects. Makes it fairly significant, and this includes repair as well as manufacturing. In Alaska, we're building a whole variety of boat types. In this study, we talked to about half of the state's boat and shipbuilders, essentially. There are commercial fishing boats that are being built, including some that are fairly large and advanced, in addition to the Alaska-class ferries that are being built in Ketchikan. We have recreational craft. We have charter boats. We have a variety of commercial fishing boats as well. So we have actually a fairly wide range of vessels that can be built here. We also found something that we didn't expect to see necessarily is that boat building is an ancient craft in a lot of ways. It's a legacy industry, and it's kind of governed by traditional methods of doing things. But what we didn't expect to see, though, is how much innovation is really happening there. And that actually makes sense, that Alaskans would be innovating in a space that they know well. We had a couple of boat builders that are developing software to help with the process of either managing their workforce or with estimating the cost of building a vessel. We have the use of non-conventional materials, such as one boat builder in Fairbanks that produces boats out of a high-density thermoplastic that is almost completely indestructible, not a typical type of material being used. All manner of new designs and shapes that are designed for Alaskan conditions, and things like electric propulsion, which is becoming the dominant force in automotive technology that is eventually going to make its way into boat building, and we have people moving in that direction in Alaska as well. Alaskan boat builders tend to, rather than competing on price, the cost of business in Alaska is high, where they can compete in Alaska is on specialization, on customization. They build boats for Alaskan operating conditions where they know the customer really well, they know the needs really well, they know the operating environment well. So this is what boat builders tend to do, is they try to differentiate themselves in that way. We had several of them. We asked all of them the question about who your competitors are, and we expected that to be larger manufacturers based in the lower 48, and many of them tended to answer that they didn't really feel that they had competitors because of the fact that they were so specialized, or their product was so unique that they didn't really feel that there was somebody that directly competed. We focused on the building of boats and ships, but a lot of the discussion around the maritime sector in Alaska is about both building and repair. And we were really interested in what the relationship is between building new boats and in servicing existing vessels. The reality is that they're very closely intertwined and in very complementary as well. A lot of boat builders told us that they had better margins when they did service work on boats, but the problem that they encountered was that everybody needs their vessel serviced in the summer. And that creates all kinds of problems when it comes to their workforce and just revenues on a year-round basis. And that a really successful approach would be to build boats in indoor environments in the winter season, and then you could keep a crew of workers busy all the time. Workforce being a major issue in boat and shipbuilding. Almost everybody that we talked to said that they had some degree of workforce issue, and the workforce problem ranked among the highest barriers that they faced. This is everything from the existence of enough welders or specialized or skilled workers, all the way to just entry-level work where people can't find workers that have the right soft skills or even reliability, and in a lot of cases, these companies are operating in smaller coastal communities where a lot of the workforce is going commercial fishing in the summer, and so there just aren't that many people to take the jobs anyway. So this tended to be a major issue. And so there's, of course, the Maritime Works and the various efforts around workforce development, but they definitely came into sharp focus when we looked at this study. We also found that a lot of them have certain needs for things like process improvements, things like Lean, Six Sigma, areas where they could improve their operations. Boat building often happens on fairly tight margins, and there's an issue also with managing capital. They have to stock up on expensive supplies before getting paid by the customer in a lot of cases, and so there's a working capital issue. We found that a lot of boat builders were needing a lot of this kinds of operational assistance. Something that we found too as an interesting example is that a need for that there's a strong potential for some shared marketing around Alaskan-built vessels. The state of Maine, which is really proud of its maritime traditions as well, and is home to a strong boat shipbuilding industry itself, has this nonprofit organization called Maine Built Boats, and it's a collective marketing effort that's trying to elevate the profile of the whole industry. And we felt like there was a potential for something like this in Alaska as well. And a lot of the boat builders themselves said that marketing was an issue, and many of them didn't even have functioning websites, as a matter of fact. So a shared marketing effort seemed to make sense. We also found that while there are some existing workforce development issues, there's a need for more of a cohesive statewide approach to economic development that mirrors that. And that can include the technical assistance components that are more for the management, as well as the workforce development training efforts for the workforce itself, the industry-wide marketing and also technical assistance components. And there are also infrastructure projects out there that could potentially help this industry to grow as well. So that's the summarized version of things. If you look in the Anchorage Daily News today on ADN.com, there's a feature, a short article that's about this study. And you can also find a link to the report in that article as well. And it is on the Division of Economic Development's website. So anyone interested in that, I encourage you to take a look. And I'll be around at the conference if anyone else has any questions on the subject. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nolan and Brittany. I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker who's got an exciting announcement for us. Daniel White became the Chancellor of the University of Alaska Fairbanks in July 2017. He joined UAS faculty in 1995 as a professor of civil and environmental engineering. And since attending his first Innovation Summit in 2012, his career has progressed. From the director of the Institute of Northern Engineering, UAF Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, and head of the Office of Intellectual Property and Commercialization. I see a link to the two. Please join me in welcoming UAF Chancellor Dan White.
Well, thank you, Bob. I will try to keep my remarks to exactly 3 to 5 minutes. And thank you for getting me started off in 2012. It's really an honor to be here. This is the innovation event of the year, and congratulations to JEDC for making it that, and throughout these years, it is really the destination for innovators. So thank you, Brian, and thank you, Dana. And I know there are lots of JEDC folks that are contributing, so thank you for that. And Alaska's economy needs all hands on deck, and many states have put together public-private partnerships with their university and with the private sector. And you need the private sector. You need a private sector that's a good incubator for new businesses. And Brian, through his cluster initiative, has really focused on these clusters that can be good incubators for businesses. And then you need a university that's kicking out ideas, taking technologies, code, new ideas, and moving them out of the university into the hands of people who know how to make money with those. At the university, we have kind of been growing that, and really 2012 and about there is where we really put a lot of effort into getting ideas out of the university. We had 5 or 6 inventions a year for 20 or 30 years. And then that year in 2012 for 2013, we went up to 30, and the next year to 70, and the next year to 75. And back about 10 years ago, we said, you know what we really need is an incubator, a business incubator in the university to try to help businesses get over the valley or across to bridge the valley of death. And at that time, 10 years ago, we said, you know, we don't have the critical mass yet for an incubator at the university. We don't have enough ideas. But we do now. It is just remarkable the amount of progress that's been made. Gwen Holdman, many of you know, is now the director of our Office of Intellectual Property and Commercialization, and she, with Peter Webley and Mark Billingsley is here, and the Vice Chancellor Larry Hinsman, have taken that to the next level. So yesterday we cut the ribbon on Center ICE, which is the first University of Alaska incubator ever, and it will start with 5 startup companies and 10 innovators, and treat these in a cohort model. And so I'd encourage you, we think great things will come of this. It's the first time that we've been able to take this step, and we think the critical mass is finally there. So I would encourage you, if you get a chance to talk to one of the people, Vice Chancellor Hinsman or Intellectual Property Specialist Billingsley, or Peter Webley. Peter Webley is an innovator. Peter Webley is in fact, the first successful startup out of the University of Alaska, and he's an ambassador, an intellectual property ambassador for the university. So encourage you to talk to him. I won't be here tomorrow, but I sure appreciate the opportunity. I sure appreciate what JEDC has done in bringing just world-class speakers to this Innovation Summit. So thank you, Mr. Johansson, also for your contributions. Thank you, Brian.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Heather Handyside from GCI. As a Senior Director of Corporate Communications and lead spokesperson at GCI, Heather Handyside is responsible for developing and delivering the company's corporate message and brand. Before joining the GCI team, Heather served as press secretary for former U.S. Senator Mark Begich, as deputy municipal manager for the municipality of Anchorage, and as director of the Homeland Security for Anchorage's Office of Emergency Management. Before moving to Alaska, Heather worked for the Seattle Technology Alliance, where she helped launch the region's first angel investor network. So please help me in welcoming Heather Handyside.
Okay, hey, thank you for that nice welcome, but I think we need to have another round of applause. I'm just gonna give a shout out right now. I see some kids in the audience. These kids right here, you, Top Hat, I've had my eye on you. No fidgeting this whole time. You've been listening like you were riveted. You have a future, buddy. You guys, doing great. The kids. I know these presentations are a little bit long, and I know we're a little bit behind, so I'm gonna talk real fast to catch us up. I'm here to tell you a little bit about GCI as, maybe in a new framework as Alaska's first real technology startup. And a lot of you probably think about GCI as maybe your cable provider, or maybe you have our wireless service, but if you scratch the surface, we really do have kind of the quintessential technology startup story. So I wanted to share that with you today, and then give you some context for my startup experience in the 90s in Seattle. And then I just wanted to echo a little of what Lieutenant Governor Malott said about the importance of the innovation economy and how we need as many tools in our toolkit to help make sure that the economy continues to thrive here in Alaska. So first, a little bit about GCI. If you think about GCI as a startup, I mean, it really has all the right ingredients. It had Ron Duncan and Bob Walp, who were two young guys with big dreams. They were kind of scrappy, but they had a little bit of swagger. Bob was a thoughtful NASA scientist who brought a lot of vision and innovation. Ron was a recent Harvard Business School graduate. He was ready to set the world on fire, and he wasn't ready to take risks. There was obstacles that they had to overcome. They had challenges. It stressed their relationship and their partnership, but somehow they managed to get through and become a huge success here in Alaska and help grow the Alaska economy. It's a major success story here in Alaska, and I think also it might be, a theme for maybe a couple Netflix series that are going on right now. So it's like your classic technology story. But it really is only half the story. Along the way, as Ron and Bob were growing the company, they were also investing in Alaska and really contributing to Alaska's economic success statewide. And that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. I think it's so important for the people in this room to be coming together and talking about the importance of the innovation economy, because I think you really have to be intentional about this. You have to be thoughtful. You have to create an environment that supports and fosters innovative new startup companies. You have to create an environment that welcomes and encourages people who are going to begin startup companies to come to Alaska. And it really is the responsibility of the business community, of nonprofits, of the education sector, and of policymakers to make the decisions that create the environment that helps new startups thrive. So I thought I would just give you a little bit of background of my experience in Seattle, and I think some of that kind of lends itself to what is emerging here in Alaska today. I got involved in the tech sector in Alaska and the startup community when I was working for the Technology Alliance. The Technology Alliance was a spin-off from the Seattle Chamber of Commerce around 94, 95. And what the Chamber of Commerce was discovering is that the tech economy was booming. They really couldn't get their arms around it. How could they harness this energy? How could they be strategic about these kind of technology businesses? How could they foster more growth and more startups? There really were no rules at that time. Seattle in the mid-90s, it was, very chaotic. There was incredible wealth that was centralized. There was immense wealth being accumulated. There were a lot of young people that were getting very wealthy, and I will tell you, everybody in Seattle wanted to get on that train, right? Everybody wanted to start the next startup. Everybody wanted to be the next Bill Gates. So it was a super exciting time, but the rules really weren't clear. And that's why we were so lucky that Bill Gates Sr., who's father of Microsoft Bill Gates, stepped forward to be the chair of the Technology Alliance. Bill is a giant in his own right. He is the lawyer of the firm formerly Preston Gates and Ellis. He's that Gates. He served on the University of Washington Board of Regents for 15 years. He's an author, philanthropist. He now is chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Bill was really striving to put a framework around all of this growth. How could we capitalize on it? What were the things that contributed to the success of the Seattle technology economy? How could we continue to foster it? Bill was really convinced that, the reason that Seattle and Kirkland and Bellevue experienced such growth was really just luck. And he thought we really need to be more strategic about it. He thought, what were the things that made Microsoft successful in Seattle? What would have happened if they launched in New Jersey or Pennsylvania? What if their employees were educated in the school systems in San Antonio or in Provo, Utah? How would that have been different? How would the outcomes have been different? So Bill, and I think Bill's main motivation was that he lived in the Pacific Northwest all of his life. He had lived through the recession in the 70s. And in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, Seattle was really a maritime, timber, and manufacturing community region. So in 69 and 70, when Boeing laid off 60,000 employees, that sent the region into a huge recession. There was 13% unemployment, which was double the national rate at that time. And Bill lived through that time. Bill recognized that, the importance of diversifying your economy, having a strong economy, and he really wanted to be intentional, just like, the people in this room want to be intentional about making it grow. So Bill was looking for the things to stack the deck in Seattle's favor. And he came up with some things, I think, again, some of the things that Lieutenant Governor Malott was talking about tonight. Seattle really needed to make sure we had an educated workforce. We needed to continue to invest in research institutions like the University of Washington and Battelle and Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, because those research institutions were creating the most successful spin-offs and startup companies that were really growing and thriving in the region. So educated workforce, invest in research institutions, and then we really need to provide more access to capital for our startup community. That's when we decided that we needed an angel investor group. And you have to remember, everybody knows right now what an angel investor is, but in the mid-90s, it was really an unusual term. It was new, it was exciting. We decided we needed an angel investor firm network, and so we modeled our network after the Band of Angels, which had started in San Francisco in '94. We were alarmed about these high net worth individuals who were investing in San Francisco and were investing in all these companies in Silicon Valley. We saw some of our Seattle companies beginning to go down to San Francisco for funding and then move to Silicon Valley to launch. We were also losing a lot of talent from Seattle down to Silicon Valley, and that was the opposite of what we wanted to happen, and I think the opposite of what we want to happen here in Alaska, especially in these kind of challenging economic times. So we launched the Alliance of Angels. I will say since the launch in '97, the organization has been very successful. They have $6.6 million in seed funds. They've invested over $100 million in more than 200 startups. They've seen 40 successful exits and over $1 billion generated in returns. But during those years, so lots of success over the past 20 years, but during that time, it was really the Wild West. There was not a lot of Wall Street. There's a lot of urgency about investing in these startups. You didn't want to miss an opportunity. And I wish that we had done a better job as investors helping really foster these young entrepreneurs. We really weren't prepared for how many applications we received at first and how complex they were. We had to make decisions about, was this medical polymer really going to be successful? That's a pretty specific skills or knowledge that you have to be able to evaluate that. And then plus we had to figure out whether that would be financially successful. So we learned as we went, and my job was to really do the initial vetting of the organizations that obviously weren't a good fit or obviously were a good fit. And I really regret at that time that we didn't have an organization like this one who could take the startups that were very promising but needed more support and help them grow. So we don't know what opportunities we missed because of that time. But one thing was pretty consistent then, I think it's pretty consistent now, is that all of the investment, all the organizations and the entrepreneurs, they were enthusiastic. They were super smart. They loved their ideas. The more successful ones had a strong team behind them. The most successful ones presented a pitch that was a solution to a problem. And the rarest but most successful by far were the ones that presented a solution to a problem, but also presented a financial plan that made sense, a financial model. So I think that's probably true today. It's something that is still a struggle. And so when you lay all those elements out, enthusiasm, drive, smarts, strong team, driven to solve problems, tenacious perseverance, that's really what you saw in 1979 when Ron Duncan first launched GCI. So this is Ron in 1977. Obviously, success was destined, right, with this kind of marketing materials. This Ron, was the 1970s version of the tech entrepreneur. He didn't have a hoodie. This was more of like a members-only windbreaker kind of thing he had going on. But he moved to Alaska after graduating from Harvard Business School. He wanted to start a cable company in Fairbanks, and he got his start living in the basement of Santa Claus House in North Pole. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the most Alaska startup story ever told, right? Just in that sentence. He met Bob Walp a couple of years later. The two of them decided to bring competition to the long-distance industry market here in Alaska, which at that time charged $1 a minute. And Ron, looking back, says that if he knew then what he knew now about everything that they would have to work through, he would never have started this company because it would have seemed absolutely impossible. He couldn't have anticipated the obstacles that he would have encountered. They had all kinds of technical and engineering challenges, obviously living in Alaska and building in Alaska. But they also had a lot of legal and regulatory issues that they had to deal with. They accumulated about $10 million in legal fees before they ever dug anything in the ground. So if funding problem, yeah, talk to Ron. The other founder of the company was Bob Walp. Bob was the NASA scientist. He had been working for NASA in Brazil, deploying remote satellite and microwave systems to bring communications to remote regions. And Bob really believed that he could use this technology in Alaska to help connect rural communities. He saw a future where rural Alaskans could use connectivity to get access to government services, to healthcare services, to education. And at that time, these were really revolutionary ideas. He and Ron got started in a small apartment in Bootleggers Cove in Anchorage. At one point, Bob mortgaged his house to keep the company going. At that time, he was married and had 3 kids, so this was no small thing. And it was almost that he said GCI had to succeed, right? Because he had to make sure his wife wasn't mad at him forever. So with this, kind of classic startup beginnings, GCI has seen a lot of success, and it's really thanks to the people in this room. You are our customers, you've contributed to our success. Obviously, we wouldn't be where we are without you. But I really want to demonstrate the importance of a startup, both for the success of the company, but how it can contribute to the economy as well. Over the past 40 years almost since GCI got started, GCI has invested more than $3 billion back in Alaska's economy. We have more than 30 stores all across the state. We have more than 2,200 employees in Alaska and the lower 48, 4 of my favorite ones sitting at the GCI table this evening. We're a company that builds massive infrastructure projects across the state, so really what's been good for GCI has been good for Alaska. GCI now delivers, in addition to long distance, we deliver wireless, cable and pay TV, and internet services, so different services all across the state. And by delivering these 4 services, our company is really nimble and really flexible and can kind of easily respond to changes in the market or changes in consumer preferences. We have Alaska's largest wireless network. We serve 240 communities, and 97% of Alaskans live in a GCI wireless footprint. Can we do better, or is there still some pockets where we need to invest? Yes, and we're continuing to invest. But why is GCI's network so big? It's because we're willing to invest, and we're willing to build where others won't. Over the past 4 years, we've invested $150 million in our wireless network, both to expand the footprint and also to increase and improve the coverage within that footprint. Our success and our growth as a company has allowed us to build massive infrastructure projects like the Terra network. This is a $320 million project that we completed last year. That brings high-speed broadband to 45,000 Alaskans in 84 remote communities in western Alaska that otherwise are unlikely to have received service. If you look at this map, kind of the red ring in the middle is the Terra network. It's 3,300 miles long. If it was a state, it would be bigger than Texas. Texas. Why do we make these kind of investments? I think it really goes back to the vision of Bob Walp that we, the Alaskans everywhere, deserve to have the same kind of connectivity that people in the lower 48 take for granted. And the other reason is that Ron Duncan is not afraid to take risks. Subsea fiber, we've got 5,500 miles of it, more than anybody in the state. And I'm showing you these projects so that you realize that in addition to building these out, we have to build them and we have to maintain them. And they really become kind of mini economic engines for the economy. For example, the Terra project employed 600, or provided 600 jobs during the construction period. And we now have a crew of 29 people who are stationed in Bethel who have to maintain the network. So once you build it, you've got to maintain it so it keeps creating jobs. These are great paying jobs. And I think it's really exciting to think that somebody in this room, somebody who's pitching tonight, is not only going to have success maybe in their own right as their own business, but could become the next economic engine that could bring these kind of jobs to their community and to the state. One service I want to talk about in particular that I think is really important for entrepreneurs is the 1 gig service that GCI provides. 1 gig is not a GCI product, it's a speed, it's an internet speed, and it's available across the nation. It's 20 times faster than the national average, or the national, the average speed that consumers get. And GCI spent about 3 years building out our 1 gig service. It's a really important speed if you're like a gamer, or if you have data-rich applications, or work a lot with graphics. So we designed 1 gig so that we built it out in more than a dozen Alaska communities. And this is really important because building out in these communities means that 76% of Alaskans have access to these really fast speeds, compared to only, I think, 18% of people in the lower 48. We rolled it out this way because Ron Duncan believes that we, again, need all the tools that we can get in our toolbox. He wants to help level the playing field so that Alaska entrepreneurs and small businesses can have just one more way to compete nationally and across the globe. The way that we roll it out is really different is because companies in the lower 48, they just pick areas that are really dense with population or businesses. They make the best profit. We had a guy from San Jose come up. He said, wait a minute, you've got to do an interview. He's an engineer, and he said, wait a minute, you've got 1 gig all over in Anchorage, the whole city? We don't have that in San Jose. He goes, I would move up here just for that. So people in Sitka have more access to 1 gig than people in Silicon Valley. I think that's something to be proud of. And just to pick on Texas again, only 13.9% of Texans have access to 1 gig speeds. While I'm talking about the internet, I just want to wrap up here with a couple of slides so we can keep on track. But while we're talking about the internet, I want to talk just briefly about net neutrality. I know this is a big issue for everyone right now, especially in the people in this room, the entrepreneurs who depend on open and free internet, if you're a small business. I'm going to tell you that GCI has been committed to net neutrality since we launched internet. GCI was net neutrality before net neutrality had a name. I'm going to read our statement to you. We are committed to an open internet. As a provider of internet services in Alaska for decades, GCI has always been committed to an open internet that gives our customers the freedom to be in charge of their own online experience. An open internet means that we do not block, prevent, or otherwise impair our customers' freedom to direct their own online activity. This is a commitment that we stand by unequivocally, and that will not change. Can I get an amen, ladies and gentlemen? It is the truth. But seriously, it's our business model to make sure that you have access. So that is, we're committed to it. And in closing, we are, what's next for GCI? We're expanding in the lower 48, particularly the Pacific Northwest. We've launched a new office down there. We have about 50 employees, and we're growing, providing managed services to businesses in the lower 48. And I think, when you look at it, this is not a bad story for somebody who got their start in Santa Claus's basement, right? So I will leave you with Ron Duncan's recommendation to entrepreneurs. I think the number one trait that an entrepreneur needs is perseverance, because it will not go the way you think it will, and it will not go as well as you think it will. And when it doesn't go how you think it's going to go, it's going to get worse. You're going to reinvent your business plan 50, 100, 200 times before you get it right, and you've got to stick with it, and every time you get a setback, figure out how to turn it around to your advantage. Obviously, Ron Duncan, not a guy who sugarcoats things, but I think what I've seen or what I've heard about over the past day is a lot of perseverance, a lot of commitment from the people in this room. So I hope that I presented to you kind of as startups and entrepreneurs what's possible, right? But also I've imprinted upon you, the entrepreneurs, but also the decision makers and the leaders here in Juneau of how important strong startups can be to the economy and why it's so important to foster the elements that make them successful. Thank you.